December 26th, 2018. There's been a lot of things happen since the last time John Wall played an NBA game. Like, a lot of things have happened. It'll be 2 years since John Wall played an NBA game by the time he gets back onto the court. And the last time he played a game was against the Detroit Pistons, and he dropped a characteristic 21-8. That was the last we've seen of him. 2 injuries, including the most significant one, an Achilles injury, has seen him sit out for 2 years. And since then, a lot of things have changed for the Wizards. They've made some bad decisions, some awful decisions, like terrible decisions. And then they've made some good ones, some smart decisions. But there's still been a lot of changes. It's a completely different team since the last time we saw John Wall and Bradley Beal on the court. And one of those players that's completely different is Bradley Beal, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But we need to talk about what John Wall can bring back to a roster that's desperately needed him a couple of years. I mean, Bradley Beal's taken a step up and is now averaging 30 points a game, and that's great. But switching out John Wall's minutes for Shabazz Napier and Ish Smith can only go one way, and that's in a positive way. I don't care if he's the most overplayed player in NBA history, according to all the reporters. Switch out John Wall coming off an Achilles injury or not for Shabazz Napier and Ish Smith, and it's going to be a positive outcome. But just how positive an outcome can it be? Let's look at that. Now, quickly before I go any further, if you could drop a like on the video right now and subscribe to the channel, it'd be much appreciated. I make this content like 6 to 7 times a week, very frequently, and I put a fair bit of effort into it, and liking the video really helps it out. Also, follow me on Twitter. I'll follow everyone back. I'll eventually start using it by sometime next year, by the time the NBA season's back up, so trying to get some people on that. Other than that, let's get back into it. Now, let's start with John Wall. He's definitely the biggest question mark surrounding the Wizards. Now, given the injury and given what his game was comprised prior to the injury, people don't expect him to get back to 100%. Maybe 80% sees him get back to the 12th best point guard in the league, around there. But that's not good enough if the Wizards want to make the playoffs, which is obviously what they're trying to achieve if they're trying to keep Beal and they're trying to keep Wall. And they need John Wall to get back to close to 100% if they're going to make the playoffs in a stacked league and even a stacked Eastern Conference with the Nets getting back to their best and a few other teams improving. They're going to need the best out of John Wall. And what is the best out of John Wall? Now, Wall's made it clear that he feels better than ever. I mean, every player says that after an injury. What are they going to say? I feel terrible? No, that's not going to happen. But seeing the footage, seeing the recent footage of him working out, seeing the recent footage of him training 5v5s, sure it's against G League players, sure it's against Anthony from the local YMCA, sure that's not the best competition, but he did look good. He did look explosive. He looked close to his explosive best. It's hard to tell again because of the competition. His shot did look better. That was a big thing. It did look like he had better arc on the shot. The form looked a bit better. It didn't look like he was shooting it on the way down, which isn't always a bad thing, but it is more optimal to be shooting it on the way up. So if he could get his shooting percentage up, which we'll talk about, that would be crucial. People are quick to forget what John Wall was over 9 years in his career. He averaged under 8 assists once. One of the best playmakers in the league for a decade. One of the best point guards in the league for a decade. But even if he doesn't get back to his best, let's take a look at a player that maybe he could be similar to, like a Ricky Rubio. Now, when I mention that name, people will probably be outraged, but he's a good player, and Ricky Rubio came into a Suns team, and what he brought was playmaking and a veteran presence, and that's what they needed. They turned from one of the worst teams in the league to a very solid team, a team that's on the up, and his playmaking and passing ability was responsible for them becoming the #1 assist team in the league. They love to move the ball now, and it all starts with the point guard, and John Wall could have that similar kind of effect. The Wizards' offense isn't bad, but you can expect guys like Thomas Bryant, Davis Bertans, those kind of guys to get even better looks than they were getting prior when you bring in one of the best playmakers in the league. And regardless of his injury, regardless of if he's less explosive than before, I can't see his passing going too far, and I could still see him being that 8 to 10 assists per game kind of guy. But another thing that John Wall's going to bring and the Wizards are going to need is his defense. Now, it doesn't seem like it's a big thing for a guard to be coming in and making a big defensive presence. Now, defense is just not a strength of Bradley Beal or the Wizards at all. They're a terrible defensive team. But what Wall will bring is he's an all-defensive type guy. He's been a great defender in the past. And what he's going to bring is more pressure on the guard taking the ball up. He's just going to allow the defense to set up better because he's going to be applying that pressure from the start. He's going to allow less easy looks at the rim as get to drive by the first wave of defense as easily. That's why the Wizards gave up so many points at the rim. Obviously, they don't have the rim protection, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But them not having good guard defense also trickles down to them getting beat at the rim. It's all a knock-on effect, and John Wall coming in and being a good defender could come in and make a big impact on the team. Now back to his three-point shot, it looks better, but it's hard to tell. Even if he can just be a guy like Rondo, who was in the finals and he was knocking down catch-and-shoot threes, he was knocking down wide-open threes. That's at the very least what we need from him. We're not expecting him to start pulling up from three. If we can just get 1 to 2 threes a game and just shoot it at a decent clip at around 34 to 35%, not force it, but also make the right decision. If he can refine his shot just a little bit, just make it a bit better, more of a threat from outside, so he's not a non-shooter like some other point guards in the league, that would go a long way. And you'd think after 2 years off, where you don't have much else to do but be able to shoot, really, that's the only thing he's been able to do, you'd think it'd be a bit refined, and I expect it to be a bit better. I expect his shot to have gotten a bit better. If anything's going to get better over that time, it would be his three-point shot. But even a healthy Wall, a healthy Brad Beal, I don't think it's good enough for the Wizards to get back to where they were, which was around the 50 wins. Maybe it's good enough to get them back to around 500, we'll have to see. But they need a few more pieces, and the main thing that they need to do is re-sign the Latvian laser. They need to do everything they can to bring back Davis Bertans, their best shooter, one of the best shooters in the league, a Duncan Robinson type guy, and we saw the impact Duncan Robinson had in the finals. We saw that his impact, the presence of a catch-and-shoot guy like Davis Bertans, translates to the biggest stage, and that's what they're going to hope. They're going to try to bring him back, and that's the biggest order of business. If you have to do one thing in free agency, and one thing only, bring him back, because I want to see him alongside John Wall as well, who's going to get him even more looks than before. This is Bertans' first year really being unleashed. He was a bit of a bit part player in San Antonio. He showed his shooting in San Antonio, but he was unleashed in Washington, and I think he could get even better. I think there's still a bit more room for improvement, particularly when you bring in a great pass-first point guard. He could turn into a really dangerous threat, even more of a threat, and that's the major thing they have to bring back. Davis Bertans, that's it. Just bring him back. Now, a way they could bring him back would be maybe to trade Ish Smith and sign Shabazz Napier, who will be a couple million cheaper and probably perform a similar role off the bench. That would be a potential way they could free up a bit of cap space by doing things like that. Just a few nifty moves, and those are the kind of moves they're going to need to make when you've got so much money tied down to two players. But outside of Davis Bertans, outside of the two obvious players, the Wizards have some solid role players. They're not great, but you've got guys like Thomas Bryant, you've got guys like Mo Wagner, Troy Brown Jr., Jerome Robinson. These are all pretty young guys that have shown improvement, and if they can continue improving and become solid rotation players, that would be crucial to Washington's success and them getting back into the playoffs. Now, if getting Wall back to full fitness and keeping Bertans were the two most important things, probably just as important is drafting well. They did well last year with Rui Hachimura. I don't know if he's going to be a star player, that's hard to tell, but he's a solid player, and that's what they brought in. They needed someone to come in and complement the two players they already have, and Rui Hachimura came in and did that. He's good at getting to the rim. He's got a good mid-range shot above 46% from that area. He's got a few frailties, like his shooting isn't great, and that could be an issue. A downfall for a team that brings in a point guard that's not a great shooter either, and in the draft, they might look to someone else who's not a great shooter. They've got a point guard that's not a great shooter, and if Rui can't develop his shot, that could be concerning. What he does well is he scores, and he's got a good enough frame and the athleticism to be a good defender, and he improved all throughout the year. His playmaking developed as well. All signs of his game developed, and I think at the very least he's going to be a solid role player, which is a tick for the Wizards given the pick that they took him with. Now, in this year's draft, the biggest area of improvement is defense. I talked about how Wall could help the defense, but they need to bring in more defense. Sure, the rim protection could go up if you have more pressure on the ball, but bringing in someone like Onyeka Okongwu, I think, could be one of the best prospects in the draft. Has versatility on defense, someone who can guard multiple positions, a very effective rim protector given his strength and verticality, and he offers a lot defensively that they're lacking, and he would be great to slot in at the 5 or the 4 depending on how the system fits for him. He's got nice touch, and he might eventually stretch the floor, but at the moment, him not being able to stretch the floor could be a downfall. If you've got Wall and you've got Hachimura, and now you bring in a Okongwu, that's 3 players in your starting lineup that potentially can't stretch the floor. That could be an issue. So a potential alternative to that, if you don't want to get in someone like that, is Devin Vassell, who prior to that video we saw of him shooting in a very weird way. He's your prototypical 3-and-D player who shot at around 40%. He's a great defender, one of the best wing defenders in the league. He fits the profile for the team the Wizards are looking to build. It's just really dependent on whether you take someone like Vassell, who I think's got a high floor but probably not as high a ceiling as Okongwu. I think either pick would be a good pick in my opinion. It's hard not to look at this duo and think of the Rockets. You've got someone who can get to the rim, who can play make and can't shoot the ball, John Wall, Russell Westbrook, and then you've got 2 very high volume, very good scoring shooting guards in Bradley Beal and James Harden. Bradley Beal's not at James Harden's level yet, but at 26, given the improvement he made last year to this year, I could see him going up another level. If he can improve his playmaking, that's probably the one thing holding him back. If he can get to the rim a bit more as well, then I could see him being in that James Harden category. It's another step he needs to take, but he's already gone from here to here, so he just needs to go to here, and there's potential for him to do so. If you can have those two players providing the same kind of impact that the Houston Rockets are providing, and then you look at the mistakes the Rockets made with not bringing in a big, with getting rid of their bigs, maybe bring in someone like a Kongwu who can protect the rim, who can catch lobs, who can do those things that you need from a big man, and then you have someone like Davis Bertans who can offer that shooting, and you have Rui Hachimura can slash to the rim, and you've got a solid roster with a few good bench players like Troy Brown Jr., Thomas Bryant, these kind of guys, and I think the Wizards are in a solid place. Whether that's good enough for them to get back to the playoffs, it's hard to tell. We need to see what John Wall can provide. But I think if they get a healthy John Wall back and they make the right draft choice and they bring back Davis Bertans, a few big ifs, they could be around that playoff spot. I think there's going to be a lot of teams around that playoff spot, but I think the Wizards will be in contention. They were like 25-40 before the bubble, which is a solid record considering they had a more plated team all year. So I'd suggest they at least improve to like 35 wins if all of those things happen. Maybe even more than 35 wins. That's probably around the low point if they get back a healthy John Wall and everything else goes to plan. If you did enjoy the video, a like would be greatly appreciated. If you made it to the end and you haven't subbed, consider doing that. It would be greatly appreciated as well. So as I mentioned, follow me on Twitter. I'm going to be more active. I'll be following back. I'll do all of that good stuff. Other than that, I'll catch you next time. Bye.